Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we have got a stack of sources that are setting the stage for what I can only describe as, well, the ultimate showdown.
It really is. But maybe not in the way people usually expect when they hear that phrase.
Exactly. When we think of battles, we think of physical clashes, explosions, armies.
Right.
And we definitely have some of that today. I mean, there's a giant and a sling involved. But our sources also present this completely different type of combat, one that involves, like, a withered hand and a really silent room, and a lot of angry staring.
It's a fascinating contrast. So we're looking at the liturgical readings for January 21, 2026. This includes the famous story in 1 Samuel 17, a couple of Psalms, and a very tense encounter in Mark chapter 3.
And there's a reflection, too, right, that helps connect it all.
Yeah, a devotional called Mercy Above the Law, and it really helps tie these, pretty disparate threads together.
So before we get into the blood and guts, and there is plenty of that, what's our mission today? What are we trying to get out of these texts?
I think we're here to explore how these texts kind of deconstruct the whole idea of power. We're looking at this clash between rigid expectations, whether that's military protocol or religious rules, and this disruptive force of faith and mercy.
I love that, disruptive force, because let me tell you, digging into the text of David and Goliath, there are some gritty details that definitely get left out of the children's books.
Oh, absolutely. It is visceral. But what's so interesting is connecting that physical violence to the emotional tension we see in the gospel reading.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the heavy hitter. 1 Samuel 17. The stones and the sword.
Right.
We all know the basics. David, Goliath, boom. But the setup in the actual text is so much more nuanced.
It starts with doubt. And not from the enemy, which you'd expect.
Yeah.
The doubt starts, inside the camp.
Right. It's Saul, the king. David steps up, this kid who just came to drop off some food, and says, I'll go fight him. And Saul basically looks at him and says, kid, absolutely not.
And he's specific. Saul points out the experience gap. He says, you are only a youth. Well, he has been a warrior from his youth.
It's a reasonable assessment.
From a military standpoint, yeah. He's looking at the stats. He's looking at the tail of the tape.
It's a metrics problem. On paper, David shouldn't even be on the field. But David, he pulls out his resume, and it is wild.
It really is.
He says, the Lord who delivered me from the claws of the lion and the bear will also keep me safe from this Philistine.
And notice the shift there. Saul's talking about military training, drills, experience. David's talking about survival and divine deliverance. He's introducing a variable that Saul's calculations completely missed.
And then comes the gear. This is such a great detail. Saul finally relents, but he tries to dress David in his own armor.
A bronze helmet, a coat of mail, the standard kit.
And David puts it on, walks around a bit, and basically says, I can't work like this.
Right. The text says he's not used to it. But I think it's deeper. If David fights Saul's way, David loses. He can't beat a heavy infantryman by trying to be a worse heavy infantryman.
So he strips it off, takes his staff, and then he goes shopping in nature.
5 smooth stones from the wadi.
And he puts them in his shepherd's bag. It's so low tech, it almost feels, I don't know, disrespectful to the situation.
It is low tech, but it's specialized. And let's be clear, a sling in the ancient world, this wasn't a toy. Slingers were elite military units. A smooth stone from a sling can hit with the force of like a handgun bullet.
So he's not walking out there defenseless. He's bringing a projectile weapon to a knife fight.
Exactly. He's rejecting the rules of how a warrior is supposed to look, but he is very much entering the battle on his own terms.
And then they meet, and this is where it gets really interesting. The trash talk. I mean, the dialogue here is intense.
It's psychological warfare, really.
The Philistines, Goliath, he sizes David up. The text says he sees David as youthful and ruddy and handsome, and he just holds him in contempt. He's insulted.
It's an affront to his dignity. He's the champion. He's decked out in all this bronze. And they send a pretty boy with a stick to fight him.
And then Goliath drops this line, am I a dog that you come against me with a staff?
That is such a telling question. He feels disrespected. In his mind, this isn't even a real fight.
And then he curses David by his gods, and he gets graphic, threatens to leave his flesh for the birds of the air.
Just brutal stuff. He's telling David, I'm going to leave you as roadkill.
But David's retort, this is where the theology just slams into the battlefield. He doesn't just say, I'm going to beat you.
No, he deconstructs Goliath's entire worldview.
Yeah, he says, you come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts. And then he flips Goliath's threat right back at him, says he'll leave his corpse and the corpses of the whole Philistine army for the birds.
And here's the why. This is crucial. David says he's doing it so the whole land shall learn that Israel has a God. And then...
It is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. That is the key line, isn't it?
It is. It's the thesis statement of the whole battle.
Yeah.
The victory isn't about better tech. It's about the source of power.
So let's talk about the climax, the mechanics of it, because I always picture David standing still, trembling. But the text says he ran quickly toward the battle line.
That's an aggressive move. He closes the distance. It minimizes the time Goliath has to react.
He puts the hand in the bag, takes the stone, slings it.
And bam. Straight to the forehead. The stone embedded itself in his brow.
And Goliath falls, prostrate, face down.
And there's a heavy irony here the text points out. It explicitly says, "Thus David overcame the Philistines with sling and stone, and did it without a sword."
But then, and this is the gritty part, David runs over and grabs Goliath's own sword.
He uses the enemy's weapon to finish the job.
Dispatched him and cut off his head. It's brutal. It's final.
And if you look at Psalm 144, which is paired with this reading, it adds another layer. The psalmist writes, "Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for battle, my fingers for war."
Oh, that's a perfect connection.
It reframes the whole thing. It's not just bloodlust. It's a theological victory. The psalm calls God my shield in whom I trust. David was the living embodiment of that. He refused Saul's shield because he was trusting in the ultimate one.
So we have this dusty, bloody, loud battlefield. Now, let's pivot, because our next source takes us somewhere completely different, but the tension is just as high.
We're moving from the battlefield to a synagogue in Mark chapter 3.
The atmosphere changes completely. It's a place of worship. It's quiet, but there's a trap waiting.
Right. The text says Jesus entered the synagogue. There's a man with a withered hand, and the religious leaders, the Pharisees, are watching him closely.
That phrase, watching closely, it feels like surveillance.
It is. They aren't watching to learn from him. The next says they're watching to see if he would cure him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him.
This is the ideological battlefield. Goliath used a spear. These men are using the law as a weapon.
That's a great way to put it. They're using the Sabbath a day, meant for rest, to entrap Jesus. And they're banking on his compassion being his downfall. It's so cynical.
So Jesus knows this. He feels the eyes on him. And he doesn't shy away. He calls the man over and says, "Come up here before us."
He makes it public. He makes the man visible, which in that culture was a huge deal. Jesus puts him center stage.
And then he poses the question to the room. Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath rather than to do evil, to save life rather than to destroy it?
This is the equivalent of David's stone. It's a direct strike at their logic. He frames it as a binary choice, good or evil, life or death.
And what's the reaction?
Silence. But they remain silent.
That silence is just so heavy. In the David story, everyone is shouting. Here, the opposition is dead silent.
And that silence speaks volumes. It's a refusal to engage. They know if they say do good, they lose. If they say do evil, they look like monsters. So they just stonewall him.
And we get this glimpse of Jesus's emotion here, which is so important.
Yeah. It says he looks at them with anger and is grieved at their hardness of heart.
Anger and grief. He's angry at the injustice, but he's grieved because their hearts are hard. They're impenetrable.
Like a stone.
Exactly. Like a stone.
So despite all that, he turns to the man, "Stretch out your hand."
And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored.
He does the deed. He breaks the protocol to restore the human being.
You'd think, okay, maybe they'll be impressed. A miracle just happened.
Not at all. The fallout is immediate and terrifying. The text says the Pharisees went out and immediately took counsel with the Herodians against him to put him to death.
Whoa. Talk about escalation. He heals a hand, and they plot a murder.
It shows the threat Jesus posed. And notice the alliance Pharisees and Herodians usually hated each other.
Right.
But they united to destroy Jesus. He's disrupting the religious and social order, and it terrifies them.
So let's bring in our third source, that reflection, mercy above the law. This really bridges the gap.
It does. The reflection argues that Jesus places mercy above rigid observance. It says that those hardened hearts value rules over human dignity.
So if you compare the two barriers, in Samuel, the barrier was physical, a giant.
The literal giant, yes. But in Mark, the reflection says the barrier is internal. It lists fear, pride, or indifference.
That's a powerful distinction. David had to overcome fear, the Pharisees. They couldn't overcome their pride.
Precisely. And the key takeaway from the source is that doing good and saving life are always in harmony with God's will. There's never a time where God wants you to ignore suffering for the sake of a rule.
That reminds me of the other psalm, Psalm 146. There's a quote, "The Lord does justice for the oppressed."
Yes. And if you think about it, both David and Jesus are enacting that justice. David saves Israel from oppression. Jesus saves this man from the oppression of his ailment and, from the social oppression of the Pharisees.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening right now? I mean, we aren't likely to face a Philistine giant.
Hopefully not. But the source material gives us a question to do something. It asks, where is God inviting me today to choose compassion and action instead of remaining silent or passive?
Passive, that's the word that sticks out to me.
It should. Think about the contrast. David ran toward the battle line. He was active. The Pharisees, they sat in silence. They were passive in their humanity, even if they were active in their plotting.
So the challenge is to examine if we're holding back because of that fear, pride, or indifference.
It's easy to be the silent observer. To see a situation that needs mercy at work, in your family, and say, well, the rules say I shouldn't get involved. That's the modern version of the silent synagogue.
The prayer in our source material asks for the strength to choose mercy over judgment, courage over fear.
And notice the last part of that. Even when it is uncomfortable or misunderstood.
That is the kicker. Acting with compassion is usually uncomfortable.
David was misunderstood. Saul thought he was crazy. Jesus was definitely misunderstood. The religious leaders thought he was a lawbreaker.
So if you choose mercy, you might get pushback. You might look like the kid with the stick. Or you might get people plotting against you. Maybe not literally, but, freezing you out.
Exactly. But the deep dive here is realizing that the stick and the stone, that small act of courage, is actually where the real power lies.
It's flipping the script on what power looks like.
So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. We've seen a shepherd take down a warrior. We've seen a healer break a social taboo.
And both of them required stepping out of line to do what was necessary.
They did. And they acted while others just stood by paralyzed.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, and I want you to really mull this over.
Go for it.
In the first story, David used a stone to kill a giant. It was a weapon of liberation. But in the gospel, Jesus was up against a different kind of stone. He was up against the stone of hardened hearts.
That is a profound parallel.
The question for you is this. When you encounter a rule or situation that prevents compassion, are you the one remaining silent, becoming another stone in the wall? Or are you the one stepping forward to stretch out the hand?
That is the question.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.